Hey everybody, it's me, JJ Panzer, your Smart Apartment Advisor. Good to see you. Welcome back for another weekly Wednesday call with RMC. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining me. We're getting ready for the 4th of July holiday this week and crying about how bad the rental market is. If you have vacancies and you're not having any luck getting people to rent them, that is par for the course these days. I actually just finished this morning another interview with Kenny Choi at KPIX talking about the rental market and about how difficult it is. It'll be the second time in the last 2 weeks that I've had an interview with KPIX. And, it's the rental market is rapidly deteriorating because, as you know, the people that we normally rely on as the ones who drive demand in San Francisco, tech people who are relocating here because all the employers are here, and students and people coming from around the world, and people who need to be here are not here anymore because they can't be here, and you can't travel, and the jobs don't require them to be at the office anymore. And so demand is really cratered. And contrary to what our politicians say about how somehow the housing market doesn't follow supply and demand, we have absolutely noticed that there's a severe reduction in the prices that we can get in this market based on the reduction in demand. So, we haven't had, we've certainly had an increase in supply over the last few years, as some people can tell you, like Bert, whose building is in a location that has a tremendous amount of new supply, and as a result is having a hard time getting qualified tenants or really anybody to join and be interested in renting apartments. But part of the issue also is that the only people who are out in the market these days looking to rent apartments are people who already live here, who are looking to upgrade or change neighborhoods, or sort of the discretionary moves that we've talked about in the past. People just looking for a change of scenery, or moving in with a significant other, or needing new roommates. And they know that this is a buyer's market. It's not a secret. And so where I used to be able to set an asking rent and, pretty much figure that I'm going to get that rent and have somebody who's ready to move in within a couple of weeks, now I figure that when I set a market rent, it may be reduced a couple of times at least before I start to get some interest. And the tenants are going to be asking for things like a free month's rent or a reduction of 10 to 20% in the rent. And they're going to be asking, no, I don't want to pay, I don't need to be here in 2 weeks. I'm not going to take the place 2 weeks from now. I don't care whether I have to move in or not. I'm not going to sign a lease that starts July 15th. It'll be August 1st now. Or maybe I think I'd like it August 15th. You just hold on to the place. I don't care what you do with it. It's promised to me August 15th, and I won't pay you for the next 6 weeks. So that's what happens in a buyer's market, and it's very challenging. And further compounding that problem is obviously, as we're all well aware, the inflexibility of the market that rent control provides, which is that if you reduce your rent now to get a tenant quickly, you're going to end up with a situation where your tenant is going to have a great deal for a long time. And so owners who have larger buildings, owners who are able to stand the pain of having vacant units for an extended period of time, are able to wait for the right people to come and to negotiate with tenants a little bit more aggressively. But we have a lot of activity going on out there. A lot of people coming to kick tires, and people aren't ready to make a commitment. We've had units where we've thought we had deals. We've agreed to 10 or 15% reductions in rent with sooner move-in dates to try to get people locked in for owners who are panicking and who really want to get their units rented quickly, only to have them pull the plug on the deal at the last minute. Right when they get the lease, they say, we had one that said, well, we just found out we have to relocate to New York. And I'm going, what? I had another situation with a client who gave me keys to their condo on 25th Street in Noe Valley. The tenant gave them the keys back on Monday. They actually dropped them off at my office on Monday. They had given the landlord 3 days notice that they had to leave town. The reason was they were here from France on visas. Their visas were about to expire. and the federal government said, yeah, we're not renewing visas, so you can't stay. So this is the direct impact that it has on our economic fortunes here in San Francisco, is when they say, gee, the people from out of the country who are making good money and they're working on visas can't stay. Well, there you go. They got to give 3 days notice. I talked to one of the neighbors in the building, said out of nowhere, a big container truck showed up. They filled it up and they threw out everything that was in the refrigerator, just put it down in the trash and walked out the door. The place wasn't cleaned. It wasn't, thankfully they didn't leave anything in the apartment, but you know, I don't think I've seen that happen very often, where people just up and leave with 3 days notice. Usually people are ready to you know, abide by the rules, but if you can't, you can't. So, and there's no way to recover from that for the landlord except to try to get the unit on the market as fast as possible. And, you know, we're going to be looking at least a 10% reduction in rent in that unit just to start. Though, you know, prices on Craigslist, prices on the internet don't seem to be falling as quickly as I might think. Though I look at the prices that people are asking and realize that a lot of times people are ready to cut a deal with a qualified tenant on the spot, as opposed to reducing the price openly, possibly also because they realize that there are other tenants in the building will figure out what the rents are if they're openly advertising lower prices, and they're going to start asking for reductions too. So it's a bit of a crisis out there, and for the politicians who say that building more housing doesn't have a measurable effect on prices, they're just not. It may not happen within the time span of their minuscule political lives, but you know, it is true. It does happen, and the markets, especially in housing, where it takes a long time to build housing, bring it online, and stabilize that supply. You know, it doesn't show up right away. You don't see the effect on pricing right away. And when demand is really, really strong, it takes a lot of supply to show that. But, you know, I've seen, especially in South of Market, South Beach, Rincon Hill areas, where we've had condos for rent in the past, I've seen prices, you know, really start to crater as a result of new supply going on the market. So that's where we're at these days. You know, going through and waiting to get apartments rented is painful. But it's even more painful, especially now, if you rent an apartment and you are not able to collect the rent, and you have an occupied unit that's not collecting rent, not paying any rent. So, you know, we're doing the best we can. We are renting a few places. It is happening from time to time, but it isn't nearly what it used to be. And I feel like I'm hurtling down a mountain at 100 miles an hour with the end of July coming. And I think John told me we have, what was it, John, 15 or 20 30-day notices coming for people who are leaving at the end of the month. And we've already got, you know, 10 or 12 available units right now.
We have 20 units going vacant at the end of July. We've never had even half that at one time.
Right. And what do we have on the market now? Something like 8 or 10 or 12?
13 on the market, 12 on the market now.
And many of them have been on the market for
2 or 3 months.
Yeah, 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And so, you know, yes, adjusting price helps, but it doesn't actually do the job when the interest just isn't there. You know, the activity reports we get from our leasing agents say things like, you know, I had 4 people who toured the apartment over the weekend. They all said they were interested in applying. None of them applied. None of them applied. So, you know, we're stuck in this situation where, you know, how low of a price do you really want to get to and have it sink, you know, stay there forever? So with that, I'm going to transition a little bit. I want to answer Nicholas's question. Nicholas asked, right now, if you have an eviction that you need to serve for whatever purpose, with the courts closed, is there anything that can be done? And I will, next week, I'm pretty sure Denise will be joining us. This week she wasn't available, but next week she'll talk a little bit more about what court looks like, even though the courts are formally closed. They say that they are open for nuisance-related issues, that they're open for serious health and safety-related concerns, and that they will adjudicate eviction-related, real estate-related claims for those sorts of things. But they're really not open right now. And if you are filing a lawsuit for non-payment of rent, really of any kind, it's not going to be heard right now while the courts are closed. And when the courts reopen, you have to realize that if the tenant makes any sort of a claim that the non-payment of rent is related to the pandemic, their loss of income as a result of the pandemic, they're not going to hear your case. They're just going to throw it out. In other places, Nicholas, go ahead.
My question was a little bit different. It had to do with the apartment association suit against the supervisor.
Oh, yes.
But what I'm trying to figure out, they're filing this to stop the new law, but since the courts are closed, how can this suit even go forward or try to adjudicate what's happened until the courts can hear the whole thing?
That's a good question. I understand your question now.
Okay.
That is a good question. And actually the answer is the courts are open for these sorts of things. So the suit was filed this week, and it's actually been scheduled for an initial hearing my understanding, and Denise will give us more information on this, but I did get an email from the industry group. There will be a hearing on July 31st to talk about whether the eviction moratorium will be enjoined, meaning that landlords will have the opportunity to file lawsuits again for non-payment of rent due to the crisis. The courts would step in and stop the moratorium. So that has been scheduled for a hearing. In other places, in red states where landlords are not treated as pariahs and profiteers, they are holding eviction hearings. And eviction is not a good thing, but it's really the only remedy that we have for non-payment of rent. If there were another way to motivate people to pay the rent that is owed or to negotiate in good faith over what is owed, we would happily listen to that sort of a conversation about how do we collect what we need to continue to operate our properties. But until further notice, we do operate in a free society where it is legal to charge people money for the right to occupy property that you own. And so at this time, we have to find a balance in this difficult time between charging money and kicking people out of their homes, and not being able to collect it, and all of us being stuck with a giant bill. I understand in circumstances. I have commercial tenant circumstances and residential tenants, but mostly commercial right now, where I know that there's a ever-growing balance on tenant ledgers where they're not able to pay the rent, and they're not going to be able to pay the rent. And unless there's some government fund that's set up to help with that payment, the landlords aren't going to be able to recover. And furthermore, going back to my earlier conversation here, I don't want possession of these units back, even if the tenants can't pay right now. I'm not going to be able to do that much better. And in the long view, especially with the commercial tenants, I have a number of commercial tenants who've been really great tenants for a really long time, bars and stores and things like that, who rely on people being able to get together, and who also rely on tourism and travel and things that are not possible under the current circumstances. And I'm working with my clients to think about this from the perspective of, look, this is your vacancy time between tenants, except you have a good tenant who is committed to coming back at a later time. And so, it's difficult. It's really difficult right now, but it's the best we can do. So to answer your question, yes, there will be a hearing on this specific issue. The courts are hearing this because it is a bigger issue than a particular eviction case. And so the courts are not completely closed. And we will know more about this at the end of the month. And also Denise will share more with us when she's on the call next week. So with that, unless Nicholas, you have a follow-up question or anybody has something they want to ask about that, I think, Bert, what do you have?
Just a question. I'm hearing again almost every day that Dean Preston is going to, there's a developer fee on the ballot.
Yes.
That's going to be there in the fall, and he claims that there will be a substantial amount available for small landlords. He indicates small landlords that were hurt by this and you know, of course, you have to wonder about what the factors are associated with it. What's your opinion? Do you think that he's sincere about that, or is he just
No,
blowing?
I don't think he's sincere about that.
Okay.
I don't think that any of the supervisors are sincere about helping landlords. That's my personal opinion. But no, I don't think I think that the level of hardship that will need to be demonstrated by a landlord will be so crippling that the only people who would qualify for such a hardship would be, you know, people who had, I don't know how you end up not having any resources at all, but still owning a property that has so many tenants who aren't paying the rent that you are facing foreclosure. And, you know, the mortgage forbearance is a worthwhile, you know, remedy. It's something that the banks are offering, but it isn't unlimited, as you know very well, and it's it's only partial. You know, and a lot of the state level solutions that we've seen, there are a couple of state bills that have been in the legislature offer things that I think are so difficult. There's like a state tax credit where the owner accepts a 10-year tax credit or something, and then the tenant has to pay the state back over the course of 10 years starting in 2024. I mean, it's such a long time, you know, probably such really trifling sums that would come in every month, that it wouldn't be very helpful. You know, I don't want a 10-year tax credit that doesn't start for 4 years. That's not.
I'll be dead by then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hell, I mean, I don't want to deal with the state bureaucracy like that.
JJ?
Yes, Nicholas.
Even in today's paper, I think Supervisor Marr, when they questioned him about the lawsuit, was saying, yes, well, you know, I can understand for small landlords, but he implied that most of the landlords are large in the city, and this is just a big scam for the lawsuit. And that, you know, so they just turn everything around. You're completely correct. I don't think any of the supervisors care about the small family-owned piece of property.
Right. Right. And they're thinking that you know, Veritas is every landlord in town, and their problem is that they don't want to help the big corporate landlords, and they don't want to be seen as failing to help small landlords, but at the same time, they don't really care about anybody who owns real estate, because let's face it, I'm looking at the list here. How many of you vote in San Francisco? Like 4, maybe 5? Yeah, I mean, I've got 19 people on the call. I vote here, and like 3 or 4 other people vote here. Bert, you vote here. You know, just a few of us. So, you know, and Nicholas, you vote here, but we're not a large voting block, and that's all they care about. And so it's and the money for the big landlords doesn't come from San Francisco anyway. So, you know, what's their vested interest? It's the people who live in the building, not the people who own it. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of a bummer for a Wednesday afternoon before a holiday. But anyhow, with that, I want to introduce Josh, who has a new deal of the day to discuss. This one looked pretty interesting. So Josh, I have the screen sharing ready for you. I'll put you on the screen. There you are. Are you ready? Hey, there you are. Cool.
Hey, Joel, did you want to ask a question real quick or have a point?
You got to unmute yourself. Hold on. There you are. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just a point, Nick. Just remember the definition of a kangaroo court. If you do get to court, the bottom line is everybody's entitled to a jury trial. Can you imagine trying to convince a jury of tenants that you have the right to an eviction?
Well, that's true. I see Miles has his hand up. Miles, did you want to thank you for doing that? Did you have a
Oh,
comment?
yeah. Sorry, JJ. I
It's
have a quick
okay.
question. I'm trying to get up to speed on all this. Um, what onus is it on the tenant to prove that they actually have a hardship? Because in Nevada, where I've got a couple of other buildings, we can check that.
Right.
They actually have to show that they actually have hardship due to COVID. And
Yes.
then it opens up the,
The conversation.
yeah, the conversation. So
Right.
what's the responsibility in San Francisco right now?
It's the same. The tenants do have to show that they have a hardship. It isn't just, I'm not paying the rent. A tenant who deliberately stopped paying the rent just because they had the opportunity to not pay the rent. Let me switch this here. Any tenant who deliberately stopped paying rent as a result of or not related to the crisis. Oh, they still have a job and they're working remotely, and they just don't want to pay the rent because they know that the courts are closed and there's nothing that can be done about it. And it's an opportunistic non-payment. I have to believe in that circumstance that would be a situation where you could proceed with an eviction. I mean, logistically, practically, yes, you could do that. For all the circumstances that we've got going right now with 35, 36 tenants, they've all contacted us with perfectly reasonable, legitimate, scenarios. I've got people who are independently employed in all kinds of different industries like landscape architect and things like that, or landscape crew, where people aren't doing that kind of work and they've lost their jobs, or restaurants, or various other sorts of employment. And so we've been collecting all that paperwork from tenants who ask for deferral of rent, and we're not experiencing people. I've had a couple of experiences where tenants have asked for help where there's not anything specifically that they need. They still have employment, and I've turned them down in that circumstance, and they've continued paying their rent. But yes, tenants are required to prove that they have a hardship that merits deferring the rent, and we are keeping that information. And then the tenants are contacting us each month to let us know that their situation has or has not changed, and then we're proceeding with running a balance on their ledger to figure out where they're at.
Thanks, JJ.
Sure, no problem. Okay, let me go back to Josh. Here we go. Josh, there you go.
Yeah. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. Here's the piece of real estate that I want to talk about today. From a broader perspective on the market, I'm definitely seeing some things that are similar to what JJ is talking about in terms of softening in the market. And I'm not seeing, it's not as dramatic in terms of price drops, but I'm like the rent drops are, but I'm definitely seeing more inventory. When I started doing this, I was seeing about 45 buildings on the market. Now we're up to about 60. There was definitely a lot of people who held back during the peak of the crisis in bringing their buildings out, and now they're bringing them out. And that accounts for some of it, but a lot of properties are sitting. They're just not selling, and for all the reasons that we kind of know. So I'm seeing more and more some deals that kind of squeak through here that definitely catch my attention. This is certainly one of them. This is a 6-unit building in the outer Richmond, priced at $2,150,000. So here's the building here. It's nothing, particularly beautiful. It's a straightforward kind of boxy 60s building. I really like 60s construction. It's solid. And these units tend to be very easy to renovate and rent pretty well. So this building, full parking, one-to-one parking, laundry on site, near Sea Cliff. Like the market in ways that I haven't seen happen down here. From the market, I'm seeing more 4s, 5s. This one is already close to a 6 cap. For it is reasonable that they're targeting. So this is a very this high in granted it's the outer Richmond. It's not perfect. It's not the ideal spot, but you don't see 6 caps are reserved in San Francisco for the toughest neighborhoods. So that's very interesting. This building is not on the soft story list, so I like that. You see this huge concrete foundation that they probably cleared, and they said, hey, you're fine. You don't need to do any retrofitting. 5 of the 6 units are fully renovated, so it's kind of step in and go. The most interesting aspect to this building for me is the return of, there's a line here. I say down payment 33% of $700,000. Down payments, a 1/3 down payment is kind of, when I got into the business, you could buy a building for a third down payment. Over the last 5 years, it's 50% or more, 60%, especially in San Francisco. With a third down, 700,000 down, is just this is the first deal I've seen that qualifies for this. So a much more manageable down payment, obviously. And to step into this kind of cash flow, net cash flow after debt service, they're talking about 7%. So $50,000 on your $700K down annually. It's just, again, this is new in San Francisco. So this is kind of what's happening. So what I'm seeing is there's a lot of people who are saying, okay, I'm ready to sell, and they're kind of thinking about prices 6 months ago. And then there's other sellers who are stepping into today's market and are saying, I understand that I have to be more aggressive. I understand that I'm going to have to separate from the pack a bit. I understand that if I really want to move this building, I'm going to have to show some nice numbers. And so I'm seeing more of these deals kind of squeak through, so to speak. So again, kind of the things I mentioned here. Here's the rent roll briefly. You have, I don't know, JJ, if you a 2-bedroom in this neighborhood, in this building, fully renovated, the top rent is $31.95. I think that's reasonable. Do you think that's too aggressive?
Well, I think the weakness in this rent roll is actually that you've got 2 deals that were reached last year in 2019, and they're your two of the higher rents. I think that's not bad. I'd have to take a look at the neighborhood a little bit more closely, but that seems like a reasonable price. Yeah. And I would make sure in the due diligence process that those tenants aren't deferring rent right now. Right. And the fact you've got a unit vacant at close of escrow is a little bit challenging, but $2,400 for a 1-bedroom isn't bad. I'm always the west side of town, especially the Richmond. You end up with lower prices than you might find elsewhere. But as I think I said in a recent call a couple of weeks ago, the west side of town hasn't had as much of a decrease in rent as the rest of town because the rents weren't that high to start with. And so as long as the rest of the tenants in the building aren't terribly challenged with paying the rent and they're all stable, I think that's that annual income is not too far off. And you're buying it, hopefully at a price. Hopefully it doesn't get bid up too much. But if you buy it at that price and you can come in with a third or even a little bit more of a down payment, you can ride through a long vacancy on that one unit and even have a tenant or two deferring for a short period of time.
Right. This is exactly what, so this is the benefit of your higher cap rate. There's just more room for risk in the building, right? So it's priced in, and it just protects you as an investor in buying something like this. Yeah, if you're going to sit on that vacant unit for 3 months, you're okay when you buy into a 6 cap deal. So, risk does seem to be priced in here, whereas a lot of buildings I'm seeing it is not. So again, that down payment. Scroll down here. Here's kind of the level of renovation, which I think is about right, about perfect for a building in this neighborhood and the age of this building. It's just pretty straightforward renovation. I think this is fine. I don't think you want to over improve out here, and they didn't under improve. So I like, again, 5 of 6 units renovated. Nothing too high end. Here's all this concrete that I love seeing in 60s construction. So you have this parking and this open air in the back. Again, like these building, that's essentially a concrete podium this building sitting on 2 floors above it. I mean, this thing is going nowhere. That's a bunker. So
I would stop you there, because the 60s buildings also have, first of all, if it's not on the soft story list, it doesn't mean it's exempt. It's 6 units, so it's subject.
He's calling it exempt.
Well, he's wrong. It's not exempt. It's 6 units. It's wood frame construction.
Well, if it got cleared.
Well, you have to take a look at the paperwork. Not being on, sometimes agents use exempt as a way of saying it wasn't on the list, which doesn't mean it doesn't have to comply.
Right. Well, I mean, I know this agent. I don't think that's what happened, but yeah, you might be right. Sure.
Well, he said that about that building on Laguna Street that we saw too, and it was on the list, or it was subject to the ordinance.
Right.
So, and I know, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but in one of our buildings, a 15-unit building of similar construction, similar age, and the same neighborhood, it was one of our first seismic retrofits that we did. It looks almost identical in design, even though this is only 6 units. That picture in the lower left corner of the garage looks identical, just a smaller version of the same building. And the developer, when they built the building in 1964, we found out that the shear walls in the garage were nailed every 6 inches along the edges of the shear walls instead of every 4 inches. And we had to redo all the shear walls from when the building was originally built. It wasn't a big project, but it was definitely a project. We had to redo all the shear walls in the garage to make it compliant. And so that's one of the downsides. I like 60s construction for the same reasons you do, but that's one of the reasons why I get nervous about 60s construction on the west side of town, is because they were putting up so many buildings so fast in the middle, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that there were some corners cut. So you got to be careful with that. But that's a due diligence issue. I can bring an engineer through the building as part of due diligence, and we can see if that's part of it, and then negotiate that down.
Sure, absolutely. So the biggest takeaways here are we're definitely seeing, it's turning more and more into a buyer's market here, and this is definitely a, unlike my deal that I'm listing currently, this one is definitely kind of anyone can jump into this property. I mean, there's not a whole lot to worry about, and so yeah, you're seeing some nice things pop up here. That's it.
Yeah, I think certainly the unit mix and the cap rate on that deal are, we haven't seen that in a long time.
No,
and
I don't know if I've seen it in, gosh, I mean, maybe recession, 2008, 2009, where you see stuff like, this kind of returns.
Right.
So, which makes sense. I mean, that was the last crisis we were in. So
Right.
here we are again. So there's going to be some things to strike.
And we get sellers who absolutely must sell. You know, they've gone through a dissolution of partnership or a divorce or someone died, and
Right.
they just have to sell. You know, oh, the building's been in the family for 50 years, and the grandkids don't get along. Like,
Yeah.
all right, well, they're going to meet the market because it's all found money to them.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
Yep.
that'll be very interesting to see as we go along, to see where the cap rates go. See, as the asking price per unit and asking price per square foot start to go down, and the cap rates start to go up as a result. And we can, we'll follow that on these weekly deals of the day. So that'll be really interesting.
I'm definitely seeing more agents advertise, collecting X percentage of rent on existing tenants. So like, the folks who are lucky enough to be collecting 100% are fully advertising that. I mean, that's the big unknown right now.
That's right. Nicholas, did you have a question?
Yes. Joshua, are you seeing any issues or problems getting financing now?
Definitely, it's just more strict, and there's just more rules and more, something like this with finance. Speaking to Chase about a deal like this, they would love to lend on this. So because there's room. So there's money. The banks still have money. They're still ready to lend. They're still in business. They're still, signs open, right? But they're worried about the same things all of us are worried about, and that's the same things all of us are experiencing. So I think that the deals that are going to finance are going to be the ones that are not razor thin, and that there's room. If they loan on 70% of this asset with these rents in place, they're safe. I mean, their debt to service, their debt ratio is solid at that point. So, no, I just think these 3 caps or these 4.5 caps with, 50% down and kind of razor thin. And if you lose 2 tenants, the whole thing kind of blows up. Those are harder to finance. So it's risk. It's risk management. Banks are thinking the exact same thing that we are, and they're looking at this deal the same way I'm kind of looking at it, and saying, okay, well, yeah, I'll loan on this. I'm protected. Whereas other ones.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, it's great having you on the team to find deals like this. I appreciate your bringing this to us and tracking the level of deals that we're seeing, the number of buildings that are on the market. I've seen a bunch, on various email lists that I've been on, a bunch of deals that sort of pop up out of nowhere, and it's interesting to see. We'll also be tracking, how long these deals take to close.
Right.
And how close they close to their asking prices. One other thing that seems to be happening, have you noticed people seem to be pricing a little bit more reasonably? They're not necessarily going for the low price to try to get overbids. Have you seen much of that?
Not as much as I would think, given the circumstances, right? So I'm still seeing these, a lot of them are just, it's hard to adjust, right? It's hard to adjust and say, hey, all of a sudden we have this virus. It's been around for 4 months, and I just lost $500,000 as a result, right? It's hard for sellers to square that. So I'm definitely seeing some people saying, I still have a city. I'm going to bring it out of, 3.2 cap because, this and that. And so I'm seeing people kind of hold the line,
right,
and try it out. And, but when they sit for 60, 90 days, I mean, it's just, you can yell at you want, you can yell as much as you want at the market, but if they're not responding.
Right. And if we want to sit on our units and, insist when we lease them that they're worth X price and we won't accept less, we're free to do that as long as we can take the pain. But a lot of times sellers can't wait, right, 6 months or a year. And a lot of times their agents aren't willing to wait. for them to come around. As we well know, sometimes it's difficult to work with clients who are being stubborn about the market and won't see that things have changed since we listed the property.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the things that, with the properties that I own, I mean, I understand that instinct right now. There is that little sinking feeling of dump it, right? Like
Right.
I got this thing is, you know, the whole market's collapsing already. You have that little feeling and you're just like, no, the whole market is not collapsing. Relax, Josh. This, you know, you're taking a punch right now, which I am on all my properties. But you know, we'll weather it. We'll get through it. But there is that sense, and so, but some people are going to push through that feeling and say, dump it, and that's where the opportunities are.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, for next week, maybe you'll be able to find us an East Bay deal to look at. I think
Yeah.
the contrast between San Francisco and the East Bay in the rental market has been interesting, that you've had more success renting stuff in the East Bay
Yeah.
at prices that are relatively close to what you had, 6 months or a year ago
Yes.
than what we're having.
Yes.
And so, that'll be interesting. If you find any deals that you really like in other markets, it'll be interesting to see whether they have promise.
Yeah, and I was actually going to bring an East Bay deal this week, and then this one popped up, and I was like, "Oh, this is."
Oh, let's go with that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, great. Thank you very much, everybody. It was great seeing you. If there are any more questions, let me know. Raise a hand on the little button at the bottom, or let me know, just to yell out. But otherwise, I am glad to see everybody. Have a great holiday. I look forward to seeing you again next week. It'll be good to catch up again with Denise, and let's have a great holiday. Take it easy, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.
Happy 4th.
Thank you.